Well, you know, you got several words here that people talk about. Socialism. Is the church a socialist state? I mean, they talk about owning all things in common. That's a very complex statement. You have to understand who was saying it, when they said it, to whom they were saying it, and about whom. The purpose of the church was to return every man to his family and every man to his possession. That is what the Messiah was going to do. That was prophesied that he was going to do it. It is right that every man have his own property so that he can make the choices to be charitable on a day-to-day basis. It is the tools of the kingdom, and they need to be in the hands of the people. When they tried to create a common purse with the golden calf, putting all their gold there, Moses made them carry their gold on themselves and keep it. Not to create this. That's what the golden calf was a central bank. They didn't have a vault. They just put it all in one object. All the city-states had similar things. They even called it in the Greek city-states, they called the golden statue the reserve fund. And under the Peloponnesian Wars, they actually cut off sections of the statue, made coins with it to pay for the army, because it was the reserve fund. And this is what it was, a way in which to bind the people together so their wealth was in one place, and they had to stay there and defend the statue and their government. But God wants you to be bound by love. He doesn't want you to be forcing your neighbor to contribute to your welfare. That's living by the sword. So the church, in a sense, is a socialist state because it does take care of the needy of its society. That's what pure religion is, the taking care of the needy of your society, but doing so unspotted by the world. And the word they use there actually means constitutional order or system of government, another thing that we cover in detail in the books. But the point is if you're talking about socialism where I send out men to force my neighbor to contribute to my welfare, where I have a common purse, read Proverbs 1, that runs towards death. The whole Proverbs, first chapter, talks about having one purse and being caught in a net. Even David and Paul quoting David saying, what should have been for your welfare has become a snare, because you've given the power to somebody to tell you how much you're going to contribute. And that's too much power. It corrupts men when you give them that power. Socialism. You read Early American in Higher Liberty, one of the books that I've written. There's a section on socialism, and you read about democracy, and nobody in early America were for democracy. Even in 1927 in the Army Field Manual, it was telling you democracy was a bad thing. But in the 1945 Army Field Manual, democracy is suddenly a good thing. But if you go back in history and look at it, they didn't want democracy. Nobody did, but I did find where Karl Marx wanted democracy, because it leads to socialism, and socialism leads to communism. And that's what happens. And even Benjamin Franklin made similar statements that democracy, will lead to destruction. You can go back to ancient Greeks, and they'll tell you that. Some of them tried democracy, and it doesn't work. But most people today don't even know the difference between a democracy and a republic. Most of what people define as a republic is actually an indirect democracy. A republic is something much, much different. Early Israel was a republic. The early church was called a viable republic in the heart of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbons, who wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, one of the most respected books on that period, printed in 1775 and popular reading amongst early Americans. Today, Americans don't even know about that. They don't know their own history. They don't know the history of the church. The early church in America, quoting preachers of that time, referred to the church as embryonic republics. What are they talking about? They weren't talking about democracies. They were talking about places where men were free to choose how much they were going to contribute to their neighbor's welfare. And they did so. And nobody was starving. Nobody was dying in the streets because of the homeless. But what was happening is communities were becoming stronger. If you go to socialism, what happens is you'll end up with a city where somebody can be raped in the streets and people close their shades and their doors because they don't care about their neighbor. People will be robbed in the streets and there will be no hue and cry to come to their aid because it's not their job. They live in a socialist state. It's the job of the government. And the government cannot maintain order. And in hard times, there will be no order in a socialist state other than tyranny itself.